If the spot XRP ETF and the Solana spot ETF both get the green light on the same day, it will be one of the most high-pressure, high-risk moments in the history of crypto when they go head-to-head. Here's the big question. In the first few important days, who gets the most inflows? We've got experts giving their opinions, information from people who work in the field, and yes, numbers that might surprise you. But before we get into this, we want to make it clear that this isn't a suggestion on what to do with your money. I'm letting you know what's going on out there right now, and you can judge for yourself how big this could get. Now, a quick note, in fact, we've been in a somewhat similar situation before. Futures-based Solana ETFs and later derivatives. Solana ETFs were able to get some attention when they came out. XRP's versions, on the other hand, brought in more flows when they were released. It's true that futures ETFs aren't as powerful as true spot ETFs, but that little peek gives us an interesting clue. This is what I'm getting at. RexShares Osprey Range already has a pseudo-spot Solana product that uses a staking loophole to give investors the appearance of owning spot assets. It's been doing well, but if you just look at the numbers from the first day of the launch, a few experts say that XRP could do better than Solana in the beginning. What is the reason? A single word: strong emotion. If you've ever used TikTok, Reddit, X, Twitter, or even Facebook groups, you'll know that XRP has a devoted following that you won't find anywhere else in crypto. We are talking about a lot of retail holders, tens of thousands, who have been carefully stacking and waiting for this kind of regulatory clarity. They think that XRP will unavoidably become the most important part of all systems for settling payments between banks around the world. That story is sticky. It spreads and makes a lot of people want it right away. On the other hand, from an institutional point of view, you would be surprised how often Solana is talked about in important conversations. Hedge fund analysts and asset allocators think that Solana and Ethereum are the most important cryptocurrencies. This isn't because they have anything against XRP, but rather because Solana's ecosystem looks more like a standard high-growth tech investment. It is quick, easy for developers, and making big strides in NFTs, DeFi, and tokenization. This is the point where the argument gets really interesting. About 90% of the trade volume on Solana's DEX comes from memecoin trading. I don't think that. That's what the on-chain data shows. It's fine if memecoins are traded in high volumes, but it's ironic that networks with big money have no real value in 90% of their trades. At the same time, XRP has a feature that Solana lacks: clear past court rulings in the United States on this kind of thing. A federal court decision in 2023 made it clear that XRP is not a security, which took away a lot of XRP's confusion. Solana still being closely watched by the SEC. When BlackRock, Fidelity, and other companies that make ETFs decide how much money they want to put into a launch, that is a very important thing to consider. There is also the unadjusted market cap contrast. XRP was worth about $174 billion at last check, almost twice as much as Solana, which was worth $88 billion. Also note that Solana's futures ETF was not very successful, and there is more spot trade liquidity for XRP. This is why experts believe XRP will be the leader at first. One of the specialists hit the nail on the head. The people who bought ETFs on the first day aren't your typical crypto gamblers. They aren't looking at on-chain charts for the next airdrop. They are passionate market investors who have been looking for a clean way to get exposure through their brokerage account. That's where XRP shines, and believe me, that desire is real. On a Saturday at an XRP gathering in Vegas, 2,200 people packed the place. When was the last time you saw a traditional finance meeting successfully do that on a weekend? This is why experts say that even if 90% of people ignore XRP, the 10% who are really into it will make big money moves in the first few days. If Solana has a great start and there is a big change in how people see it, or if there is an amazing app that everyone wants to use, then it could definitely become more popular than XRP. But if you want to know the base case, XRP gets the most attention at first, and Solana has a chance to take over in the long run. But there is a surprise. There is a much larger and different plan coming together that will make today's ETF hype look small in comparison. Jake Claver has something to say about swaps, and that's relevant here. He talked about Kodius, an offering from Ripple. You'll soon find out about that name. Kodius is a platform for holding decentralized smart contracts. Ripple started in 2014, but it stopped and then quietly started up again when the necessary technology was made available. Kodius and Ethereum-style smart contracts are different because Kodius runs contracts off-chain on a distributed network of hosts, which allows for much greater scale and interoperability. And this is the important part. It is directly linked to Ripple's interledger technology, which means it can move things of value between different blockchains without any problems, even XRP and Bitcoin. Why is this important? This is because the derivatives market, along with futures, options, swaps, and other complex financial tools, is thought to be worth between $400 trillion and $4 quadrillion. Yes, that's quadrillion. At this moment, the problem with options is that no one can measure or track the total risk right now. That lack of clarity was part of what caused the 2008 financial crisis. Having a smart contract system that you can use right away and that can deal with complex swaps, settle them right away through XRP, and keep track of risk on different ledgers isn't just a new thing in finance. That's a total change in the way the world's markets work. In that case, Clava thinks that within 5 years, the possible price of XRP will be between $10 and $50,000. If you look at derivatives demand, how institutions use them, ETF liquidity, and a payment asset that is already clear to regulators, it's easy to see why some people think this is the final goal for Ripple. And this isn't just an idea. Kodius can manage assets on different ledgers, use any major programming language to perform contracts, and XRP can be used for billing. Every smart contract that uses XRP to settle adds to the demand. Any Kodius-based institutional derivative contract could keep XRP trading for a long time. Now, as that simmers in the background, the short-term news is still this: the day the ETF for either XRP or Solana was approved. Two giants, two different stories, and maybe billions of dollars in new business at stake. One side has a level of consumer buying power that can't be matched, clear legal standing, and a vision for a solution that spans multiple decades. The other side has a lot of developer momentum, institutional interest, and a tech-friendly environment. It's a great way to begin building up things of value. The second part might look very different from the first day's fireworks. In the first 3 days, feelings and emotions guide the flows. But once that first wave of market money goes into the ETFs, institutional capital starts to move, and institutions think differently. They aren't as interested in hype as they are in sustainable liquidity, counterparty risk, yield possibilities, and whether the network they're supporting has the potential for growth needed to build trillion-dollar applications. This is where Solana has the upper hand. Changes in Solana's story are being watched very closely by organizations. Yes, today 90% of its DEX volume is driven by MemoCoin, but the chain is really trying to get the tokenization of real-world assets, high-speed trade systems, and next-generation DeFi platforms. If they are successful, the meme chain name will fade, and Solana will become the main way to connect all sorts of tokens, from real estate to treasury bills. That's when long-term ETF flows could start going in Solana's favor, but XRP is still moving. Since the 2023 legal clarity decision, the desire for XRP in institutions has been slowly growing. At finance meetings, private talks show that more people want to use XRP Ledger for central bank digital currency, CBDC trials, corporate settlement layers, and even derivative platforms like Kodius. This is the reason ETF producers are so sure that the product will stick around. This is the part that is interesting. Derivatives. Compared to the ETFs market, the futures market is a lot bigger. If XRP becomes the main part of a system for clearing and settling derivatives through Kodius, it will need XRP to settle every single contract, from a futures deal worth $10 million to an options book worth $10 billion. That makes a steady demand cycle, not just a short-term hype spike. Look at it like this. ETFs are similar to the starter. They attract interest, create liquidity, and give regular investors a way to get involved. But what about derivatives? That is the main dish. That's where the daily movement of multi-trillion-dollar payments takes place, and where for decades, infrastructure providers have been making money off of them. Ripple is aware of this. Since 2014, they've been playing the long game, setting the groundwork for Kodius and Interledger, even when no one was ready for it. And in a situation with 1,050,000 XRP, like Jake Claver said, it's this integration of swaps that people are talking about. Not just ETF payments, but a whole new system for handling finances that uses XRP to settle. Now, one more thing to think about: SEC stance. XRP has a clearer legal position, but Solana still has problems with people watching it closely. The SEC still hasn't completely changed its position, and that shadow is important. If institutional allocators believe that Solana's security status might make it harder for ETFs to be adopted, they might limit their risk until the rules become more favorable. In the short to mid-term, that gives XRP more air. And as for oxygen, desire is still the driving force. The XRP conference in Vegas will happen again. XRP meetups are full around the world, Twitter Spaces get thousands of listeners, and news about Ripple's partnerships moves faster than any blockchain PR team could wish for. That local support leads to long-term inflows, especially from everyday investors who buy ETFs at regular intervals over time. But here's where both goods have a common benefit: narrative stacking. Picture a world in which both ETFs are launched and do well. The media would make crypto ETFs more popular, bringing in billions from buyers who had never thought about the asset type before. Even though XRP and Solana may be seen as competitors, they are both benefiting from the overall growth in the market. And timing is why you need to set your plans right away, not some other time. You won't have time to make a decision once the permission goes through. The first setting is done in minutes, not hours. That takes me back to an important thing. So, what happens after the launch dust settles? That's when the ETF flows are first shaped by market makers, liquidity providers, and arbitrage offices. If Solana's on-chain TVL starts to rise because of real-world use, ETF shares will follow. If XRP starts using more institutional payment routes or gets popular with Kodius-based contracts, even more money could start coming in. And while the ETFs are the most talked about issue, pay attention to the subtle changes. Ripple is hiring people to work on swaps, Solana is adding big banks, and new cross-chain payment routes are starting up. Before the big news stories come out, these little ones often show which way the next big flows are going. I can see what needs to be done. XRP deserves the attention it gets on the first day. The long-term good chance for Solana's ecosystem growth goes towards the positive, but the biggest outlier case belongs to XRP's derivatives integration. If Kodius becomes popular, it could have a much bigger effect than anything else being considered. As you wait for possible approval, make sure you're in the right place. Keep an eye on price changes and growth milestones and be ready to act when the signal is clear. Because in crypto, that time frame for acting before it's too early or too late keeps shrinking with each cycle, and the winners are always the first movers.